It's Only Sport with Martin Devlin, Untamed. Only on the platform.
2:32. Howard, thanks so much for joining us, mate. Looking forward to this. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Howard Bryant, senior writer at ESPN, and we're talking MLB. Well, it's that time of the season, isn't it, mate, where we're sitting there and have got, 30-odd games and change to go. So now we've got to start looking at trends as to who is in what kind of position and how they're going to finish.
Well, it's my favorite part of the year, to be honest. I mean, I think that despite the fact that the game has shifted into multiple playoff teams, I'm still sort of old school where I love the baseball season, where it was the only sport where you had to come in first place to make the playoffs. That has shifted. But it hasn't really changed sort of how I feel about this time of year, where you start looking at teams over the course of the season and you wonder if they're built for the long haul. Are you a 100-game team? Are you a 120-game team? Do you have a 162 games in you? And so you start looking at some of the teams that, were really surprising. And obviously one of the teams that everybody was sort of titillated by and you thought, oh, wow, it's kind of a little engine that could, was Pittsburgh. And then they lost 10 in a row and that was it. See you later, Pittsburgh. Now they're in last place. But the big dogs are the big dogs, the Yankees and Baltimore, Philadelphia, the Dodgers. I mean, they're still the teams that seem to be heading toward the postseason. One of the big surprises is Cleveland. They've got as good a record as anybody else in the league, but of course the Yankees smoked them twice in the past couple days. So because they play in a relatively mediocre division, you don't know if that record is reflective of them being a really good team or if they're just playing a bunch of chumps.
Let's look at the Texas Rangers, defending champions, and 59-69. It's only .461. What's gone wrong with them this year, and can they realistically now, with just 30-something games left, climb back and actually get themselves a playoff spot?
No, I think they're done. And I think they're done because for two reasons. One, you've got too many teams to overcome. Even though you've got the extra playoff spots, you got a lot of teams to overcome. You're 10 games out in your division, and you're even further out in the wild card because Houston has a worse record than a few of the other teams. So you've got to overcome Baltimore, that has a better record than Houston. So the wild card may actually be even more difficult because you've got Baltimore, you've got Boston, you've got Kansas City and Minnesota. All of them have better records than Houston, except Boston. Boston's half game out. So it's going to be even harder for you to make the wild card. So if you're the defending champs, you've got to win your division and you're 10 games out of there. But more importantly than that, you're not even 500. You can't even start thinking about anything until you even hit the 500 mark. So the way I've always looked at the game, I've always seen it as if you're within 5 or 6 games of a playoff spot on September 1st, you got a shot. They are not anywhere near that right now. And, you ask what went wrong. I think it was not just what went wrong, but how many things went right last year. They got hot. You could make an argument that Houston should have beaten them last year. And they, the number of things that you really had to, that you could rely on, you're just not relying on this year. Garcia's hitting 225. Marcus Semien, good player, 33 years old, though. Corey Seager's still a good player, supposedly, in that MVP conversation perennially, but they're just not that good. And I think one of the hard parts about what's taken place in baseball these days is because you've got so many teams making the postseason, it's really difficult to tell who's a great team. It's really hard. They won 90 games last year, and they did some surprising stuff. And I didn't think they were going to beat Tampa Bay in the first round last year, but they got hot. And you look at a team like Arizona that won the pennant last year. They won 83 games. These are not good teams. So it does a couple of different things. It gives you this sort of false sense of security that, oh, well, Texas won it last year, so why aren't they, good this year? They weren't that good last year. And so, the same is true for a team like Arizona, where you're looking at some of these teams and you can't just look at them and say, okay, you're a defending pennant winner, therefore we're expecting more of you. Arizona's a decent team. They're on pace to be better this year than they were last year. But what I really want to see in baseball is something that we're probably not going to see again for a really long time, and that's just real greatness. I'm a dynasty guy. Give me great teams playing at the most important times of the year, and I think baseball has just sort of decided to become more of a tournament. So it's whoever gets hot on October 1st, that's a team that you worry about as opposed to a team that's been really terrific all season.
Which is why I suppose that we have seen so many different winners over so many recent years.